just want to start this video by saying I'm sorry, I was wrong. About 5 months ago, I ranked every brawler from easiest to master to hardest to master, and I got a lot of people saying I was just wrong. So I'm sorry if I offended you. So I pulled over 5,000 of you guys and you ranked every brawler from easy to master to hard to master. So if you disagree with this video, I take none of the blame. First up, easiest brawler, Jackie, with an average score of 1.67. This is no surprise. Jackie's basically an auto aim button. The only thing that really matters is your positioning with her. So is she difficult to master? I mean, if you can position, then she's not. And one of the biggest complaints a lot of you guys said is that those tanks are hard to master. And I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I think what you really mean is they're just hard to win with because they're so bad. Ooh, up next we got Edgar with a score of 1.74. Sorry, buddy, you are still in the F tier. Honestly, out of the brawlers in the F tier, I think this one surprises me the most just because I know that there are some Edgar mains out there that just really love him and say that he's difficult, but really when it comes down to it, he's not. We've got more to cover, but first, guys, I have a very special game for you. I wanted to give a big thank you to Tower of Fantasy for sponsoring this video. Tower of Fantasy is an open world MMORPG where you can create your own character and team up with real players to fight bosses and explore the massive overworld. This game is a real treat, so click the link below to download either on mobile or on PC. Tower of Fantasy just barely released an entirely new area in their overworld called the Grand Sea. The whole area is underwater, which means that this is actually the very first underwater area in any anime open world game. I mean, I haven't played them all, so I don't know for sure, but it's really cool. Some of the coolest places you'll want to explore in the area are the Inner City, which has such a sweet design, and then the Dragon Breath Volcano, where there's a new boss, Abula, and he is just waiting to battle. And along with the new area, they're releasing 2 new characters, Lan and Icarus. Lan is from some kind of strange dimension, which would actually explain her strange umbrella that she uses to attack. It actually seems to be really strong. And Icarus is the captain of the Mook squad and uses some sort of frozen yo-yo ball for a weapon. Icarus will also guide you through the awesome new quest that you can do in the Grand Sea, which will actually be really helpful for new players because this area, it is absolutely massive and pretty easy to get lost in. And I say that in the absolute best way possible. One of my favorite things to do in the game is just to explore, defeat some enemies, pick up some resources along the way. There's a ton to do and a bunch of new stuff coming to the game, so now's a great time to try it out. So click that link below to download Tower of Fantasy and start your adventure today. And once again, a big thank you to them for sponsoring this video. Next is Rosa with a score of 1.8. I'm not too surprised to see this either here. She's in the F tier. There's very little difficulty in actually aiming your shots. Yeah, you have to have positioning. You have to know when you're going to actually use your super. You've got to activate it and stay hidden in the bushes while you're dodging people and stuff like that. But she's not too hard to master. Okay, up next is Poco, 1.87. Also in the F tier. And honestly, I can see this as well. Poco's attacks are incredibly difficult to miss. As long as the enemy is within range, you don't even have to manually aim. You just like auto aim it and you're gonna hit them. He's a little bit more difficult than like Rosa or Jackie, obviously, just because you actually have to pay attention to your teammates' health and actually heal them when it's the right time. But even then, you're unlikely to miss them. It's not like we're talking about Byron here where you can miss your shots. Okay, next we got Amber with a score of 2.03. And she's also in the F tier. Last time I put her in the D tier actually. So you know what? I can actually see that. Amber, you just wait till somebody's within range and then you auto aim it. You just hold down the button and she'll just like attack people. And as long as they're within that range, they're going to die. So maybe I kind of overestimated her last time. I can see her in the F tier. Okay, up next we got Shelly with a score of 2.12. And she is kicking off the bottom of the D tier. There is a little bit more strategy when it comes to Shelly. You're gonna still probably auto aim most of your shots, but you cannot auto aim her clay pigeons unless the enemies are just not moving. You have to manually aim them. And you'll also have to have a lot of positioning and timing as far as like when you actually try and jump onto enemy players and try and take them out and stuff. But still, she's not really the hardest to master. Next up is Ems with a score of 2.13, and actually most people voted her at a 2 out of 5. Now last time I ranked her in the F tier, she's going in the D tier. And honestly for me, it's a little bit of a toss-up. I could have seen her in F tier or D tier, not any higher though. She's got a panic button if somebody just jumps onto you. You can mostly auto aim her shots. The hardest thing with Ems is just making sure that you're within distance of your opponents before attacking and activating her super at the right time. Next is Nita, a little bit more difficult, 2.18 average score. And she's also in the D tier, pretty similar to where I placed her last time. Honestly, she is pretty easy to use. Her regular attacks are easy to hit with as long as somebody's within range. Her bear is mindless, literally. You just place it down when you want to. Obviously, there's some strategy behind when you do it and where you do it and when you activate your gadget with your bear and with star powers and stuff like that, but she's not too hard to master. Next is El Primo, a little bit harder than Nita, and he's also staying in the D tier. And I can see this, especially where the tank's got a buff where you actually take damage to charge up your super. Like, there's a little bit of strategy involved with that that's a little bit different than most of the brawlers in the game. He's still pretty easy to use, but a really good El Primo can actually do some really good work. Okay, up next is Gale with 2.2 average score. Last time I put him in the C tier, he's going in the D tier. He is pretty easy to use. I still think that he should be a little bit higher. Just the fact that like he can actually, you have to actually aim your shots. And yes, it's going to be easy for you to hit your shots. But there's a lot of strategy involved with when to use your super, when to push people away. Well, okay. I mean, most of the time people are going to just jump on you and then you push them away. But like, there's still really good times to get. I think he's harder. Okay, I do, but it's fine. It's fine. This is your guys' tier list. I was not expecting this. Next is Spike, and I had him in the B tier. He's going all the way down into the D tier. I'm okay with that. I can understand why people would say that he's really easy to use, especially with Curveball. I think without Curveball, he's still pretty difficult. I mean, he's not the hardest, but he's difficult to use. But Curveball just makes him so easy. It's so easy to hit your shots with it. You don't even have to try to hit the spikes with Curveball. It just happens. But what's interesting about Spike is that he's really easy to play, but he's really hard to dodge those shots. So there's this weird imbalance where you kind of get more value for playing Spike than playing against him. Up next, we got Buzz, and this makes sense. I had him in the C tier. He's going into the D tier. And I can see this. He is actually really easy to use. You get pretty much a free super just by waiting and standing kind of close to people. And once you jump on them, they get stunned, and you can deal insane amounts of damage very quickly while they are stunned. The reason why I had him higher is just the fact that you do really have to aim that super, but even if you do miss that super, he's got a gadget that gives him pretty much a free super. Yeah, without the stun, but it's still really useful, and I can see why people put him in the D tier. Next, we got Daryl, a score of 2.26. And I actually had him in the D tier last time, so I feel like this is perfectly fair. I still feel like he's easier to play than Buzz and Spike, but you know, it's fine. His attacks are easy to hit. His super automatically charges. It's free super, basically. So yeah, I can see him in the D tier. Oh, I was not expecting this. Next up, we got Griff at a score of 2.3. Last time I had in the C tier, and he's going down in the D tier. I will admit that his shots are really easy to aim, and his super is pretty much impossible to miss as long as the enemy is within range. Like, honestly, his super is so good that you can just purposefully hit 2 or 3 opponents all at the same time and recharge it and throw it out. He is pretty easy to use. His gadget's really simple. Plus, his second star power just automatically heals him over time. Yeah, I can see this. I suppose D tier makes sense, kind of. On this, we got Buster, a score of 2.31. And I think he actually wasn't released last time, so D tier, honestly, that's a good place for him to start. There's a little bit of mind games that you have to play when it comes to actually activating his super at the right time and stuff like that, but otherwise, his attacks are really easy to hit. He's pretty tanky and pretty forgiving to learn how to play, so yeah, I can see D tier perfectly for him. Okay, we are moving up into the C tier with Sandy, a score of 2.42. Okay, last time I had Sandy in the F tier, so he's going all the way up to the C tier here. I'm pretty sure exactly what I said last time was that, like, if you miss with his super, then you're blind, right? You have sand in your eyes. His super is incredibly easy to use because you can just place it pretty much anywhere and it's going to be useful. You're going to auto aim with his attacks most of the time. However, he does have a short range and he doesn't have like a ton of burst damage. Like, yes, he can burst down really quickly, but once those 3 ammo are gone, he kind of struggles, and he's going to be close range enemies that are going to be able to deal more damage to him. So I can see why people would put him in the C tier. I'm fine with that. Ooh, up next is Tick, a score of 2.44. Last time I had Tick in the B tier, he is down in the C tier now, near the bottom of it. By the way, these scores that I'm going on are just an average of everybody's ranking from 1 to 5. Then I just took all the brawlers and listed them from lowest score to highest score, and then split up the tiers just like that. So either way, guys, Tick apparently is easier than I thought he was to play, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of strategy in placing your mind in specific locations so that you force opponents to try and move in different directions, and I think that that's a little bit more difficult than people actually think that it is. However, it's not very difficult to learn how to place your mind as long as you're paying attention and to get a hit or at least some damage with almost every single attack. And using a super is, you know, it's mindless. You just put it down. It's like you don't even have to have your head in order to make it work, which is exactly how Tick's super works. Ooh, this is interesting. Otis, a score of 2.45. Last time, I don't think he was in the game yet, so he's starting out in the C tier. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised by this. I personally feel like, yeah, his attacks have a little bit of a spread, but they're mostly in a straight line. I don't feel like they're too hard to hit, but they're also not super easy, I don't think. Also, you really want to make sure that you do not miss your shot with his super, and so that's a little bit tricky, but it's not the hardest super to hit. And when somebody does get hit by that super, they're going to take a lot of damage over time, and they can't respond. So like, if an Edgar or Mortis or anybody gets anywhere close to him, it's pretty much game over for them. So yeah, I can see C tier. I would have ranked him a little bit higher, but I'm good with that. Next, we have Crow with the exact same score, and I actually put Crow in the C tier last time. Personally, I don't know who's harder to play, Crow or Otis, but I feel like Otis is harder. I don't know. They got the same score. It's kind of interesting, but I feel like Crow's attacks are pretty easy to hit, but there's a lot of strategy involved with his super, and also you have to dodge a lot of shots. Like, he's fast and he's got a small hitbox size, so it's a lot easier for Crow to dodge shots than other brawlers, and that takes a lot of skill, but at the same time, it's really easy to hit your shots, so I feel like C tier makes sense for Crow. Up next, we have Chester, 2.48. Chester was not in the game, so he's starting out in the C tier. You know, when Chester first came out, I thought that he was a lot harder to play than he actually is. I thought there was going to be a lot involved with like which super are you going to use and how is your gadget, like it's all random and all that stuff. Turns out it's actually really easy to hit your shots with his attacks because the projectiles are so wide and and they spread out even more. Like it's really hard for you to miss your shots as Chester. So I feel like C tier actually makes sense, but also he's harder than a lot of the D tier and the F tier brawlers. I feel like C tier is pretty fair for him. Next we have Penny, 2.51. I had Penny in the B tier last time, so this is interesting. And I still feel like she's harder to play than these other C tier brawlers, but maybe it's the fact that once you put your turret down, like it's a pretty brainless decision to where to put your turret down. If you put it down in a good spot, it's gonna be there for a while, and it just makes it so much easier for you to actually hit enemies because enemies will run away from the splash areas, and then she can actually hit her shots on those brawlers because she knows where they're gonna hit. So like, I can see where people are coming from. Additionally, you can really take advantage of people clumping up. So like, I can see it. I can see it. Next is Squeak with a score of 2.52. And last time I put Squeak in the B tier, so he's going down into the C tier. Oh man, I don't know if I agree with this, but at the same time, I can see where people are coming from. It's really easy to dodge Squeak's attacks as long as you're at a distance, but at the same time, Squeak is really good. Sometimes he doesn't even need to hit enemies in order for him to be effective. He just puts his attack in the same spot over and over and over again, and people cannot walk through that area. So like, it's easy for you to hit people if they're not playing well, and you can get people out of position using him. I can see C tier. I'm willing to admit that. Ooh, Leon, 2.52. I had Leon in the B tier last time, so going down to the C tier is interesting. You know, Leon's shots are very easy to use. His super is also pretty easy to use as well. He's also got a really easy invisibility gadget that just makes things easier for your whole team. You still have to manually aim some of your shots and stuff, but yeah, I can see C tier. I feel like that's fair. Up next is Pam, a score of 2.59. And I had her in the C tier last time too, so this is actually perfect. The thing is with Pam is if you learn how to lead your shots so you can actually hit enemies right, she's really good because 5 of her 9 projectiles will actually hit people, very similar like a cult attack. But the thing is, unlike a cult attack, if you miss, you have those 4 other projectiles going off to the sides, which are very easy to hit. Plus her super is pretty easy to use in position, so I feel like she's good. C tier is actually solid for her. Next we have Janet with a score of 2.6. And last time I had her in the C tier as well. Her attacks are really easy to hit, even from a distance. They deal a lot of damage. Her super is really difficult to actually land damage on enemies, but it has more to do with how your opponents are positioning themselves. Like, it's really easy to dodge a Janet super, which is exactly why it's so hard, but there's not really very much you can do because you don't have a ton of control while you're flying around, so C tier is actually pretty perfect for her. Next we have Frank with a score of 2.61. I had Frank down in the middle of the D tier, so he's going up near the top of the C tier this time. And I'm good with this. I do still think it stands that like his attacks are very easy to aim, but he has that delay, which is really difficult. And you kind of have to learn when it's okay for you to take damage so that you can kind of like push people back and stuff like that. Like he's harder than a lot of the other tanks. I'll give you guys that. I might still think that he's in the D tier, but I'm fine with you guys going with C tier. Personally, I think he's easier than the C tier, but I do like playing Frank a lot, so I don't know. Next we have Eve with a score of 2.63. Last time I had her near the bottom of the B tier, and so now she's going near the top of the C tier. So even though it's a different ranking, this is actually really similar, and I think that we probably can all agree that she's, you know, about average. At least one of her 3 projectiles are really wide and easy to hit your shots with, and her super you don't really have to think about too much either. Now this is interesting. BB with a score of 2.64. I put her in the D tier. You guys are putting her near the top of the C tier. I will be the first to admit that I almost never play BB. She's not my favorite brawler to play, and it's interesting because whenever I face off against other BBs, I usually get wrecked. So maybe she's harder than I actually assume, and maybe that skill does actually translate into things. She also has that delay kind of similar to Frank, plus her super can be incredibly well if you aim it exactly right. Up next is Jessie with a score of 2.64. I had Jessie in the B tier. She's going down in the C tier. You know, I'd like to call myself a Jessie main. She's my favorite brawler, but I actually very rarely play her. And I could see why people would rank her a little bit lower. It's really easy for you to hit multiple shots on enemies if you're lower in trophies. Like literally, you just have to hit somebody once, and then sometimes you get free damage because it'll bounce off to their opponents. And if you're playing her in Heist, it's even easier, so I can see people putting her in the C tier. She's definitely not the easiest, but she's also not the hardest. Wow, interesting. Next is Bull with a score of 2.65. I had Bull near the bottom of the D tier, and you guys are moving him near to the top of the C tier. I don't understand what people are thinking here because his attacks are really easy to hit. He now can automatically charge his super by taking damage, and with his gadget that can stop his super middle of the way and slow, and like people, like maybe he's harder than I'm expecting, but I'm really surprised by this. You guys gotta let me know in the comment section below. I feel like he can't be C tier, like D tier at least, right? I mean, he's got an even spread, so I don't know, maybe. Like some people put him at a 5, most difficult to master. What? Next we got Bull, and I put Bo in the B tier. He's going down in the C tier. I mean, I said this last video, I really think that Bo's attacks are really cool because you can move one way while you attack in order to spread your attacks, and you can move the other way while you attack in order to pinpoint all the damage into one location. And I feel like that's something that only one other brawler in the game can really do. That would be Leon. And I feel like that takes some skill. Then again, I have been playing the game for like 5 years, so maybe it's not as hard as I thought that it was. Because when I learned how to do it, I mean, it was a long time ago, and I've had lots of time to do it. Maybe you guys watching and played enough Brawl Stars that it's no longer hard and it's not as cool of a trick as I thought it used to be. Next we got Mr. P, and this is very evenly, like lots of 2s and 3s, a score of 2.71. Last time I had him in the C tier, so I don't have much to say about this. His attacks are super wide. You can bounce your shots over walls and stuff like that. Like there's a lot to Mr. P that you don't have to think about, especially with his super. So yeah, C tier makes sense. Next is Bonnie, a score of 2.71. I had Bonnie near the bottom of the B tier, and now she's going into the top of the C tier. That's really close. I'm good with that. She can do a lot of things from a distance. She can do a lot of things up close. She's got a lot of utility. There is a little bit to manage, like when do you use your supers and stuff like that, and also when do you activate her gadgets. But she's not super hard. I feel like C tier is pretty perfect for her. But now we're going to the B tier with Carl. Oh man, I had Carl in the A tier, and you guys are putting him down to the bottom of the B tier. I just can't get on board with this. I feel like Carl is a lot harder than B tier. You can specifically aim your attacks against walls to bring it back to you so that you can deal more damage, and something like his gadget has a lot of utility to it. I mean, yes, his attacks are very wide. It's not too hard to miss your shots with him. Plus, you can actually like move around walls so that it'll go around and hit people behind walls and stuff like that. Like, okay, his attacks are easy, but overall, I just feel like Carl's a difficult brawler to play. I don't know. I'm sorry. This is your video. I'm gonna let you guys run the show. Carl is now B tier. Next is Barley, a score of 2.75. I put him in the B tier last time too, so this makes sense. Barley's like pretty much any other thrower. You stay behind walls. His attacks have a really wide area, so like it's not too hard for you to hit your shots. Plus, if enemies get really close to you, you can pop down a gadget and stuff like that. He's not too difficult of a thrower to master. B tier's average though, so he's an average brawler to master. Up next is Fang with a score of 2.76. Last time I put him in the B tier, you guys put him in the B tier. The tricky thing with Fang is that yes, he's a close range assassin, but charging his super from a distance is actually pretty hard because his shoe aiming reticle doesn't show past like a few feet in front of him. So yeah, he's a little bit tricky, but overall not too bad and an average brawler to master. Next is B with a score of 2.76. Last time I put her in the A tier, and now she's going down to the B tier. And you know what? I will agree with you guys on this one. I think that I overranked her last time. Her attacks are pretty wide. Her super actually makes her incredibly easy. As soon as you have her supercharge, if somebody gets within range, you activate it, and then you auto aim your attack and destroy them. Like, it's actually, like, she's probably one of the easiest sharpshooters to actually play, and I do agree, A tier was too high for her last time. Next up is Ash with a score of 2.77. Oh man, last time I put him in the D tier, he's going all the way up into the B tier. You know what, and I'm good with this. Ash is tricky. Yes, you can auto aim with him and stuff like that, but there's a lot to manage when it comes to maintaining your health and maintaining your rage so that you can actually deal as much damage as possible and risking it so that you can take enemies out while also staying alive. He's probably one of the hardest tanks to actually play. He's not like a crazy hard brawler to play, but he is definitely at least a B tier. Next is Surge with a score of 2.8. Last time I put him in the A tier, he's going down in the B tier, and I'm pretty fine with this actually. Yeah, you gotta aim your shots. Like, he's really hard at start, but once you charge up his super at least once, then like it makes it a lot easier for him. And if you can stay alive, he just gets easier and easier with every single upgrade. Plus, he can jump on people and deal tons of damage. So like, yeah, I'm cool with him in the B tier. Next is Lola with a score of 2.81. I had her in the B tier, and you guys put her in the B tier, so I'm good with this. Her attacks are really wide to hit. Controlling her shadow, yeah, that takes a little bit of skill if you're gonna play her away from you. Like, that is actually pretty tricky. But a lot of the time, you actually play her on top of yourself so you can increase damage. Not all the time, but you know, she's interesting. I'm good with B tier. Up next, we've got RT, one of our newest brawlers. RT wasn't in the game last time, and now he's starting the B tier. You know, RT is really interesting because half of him is really hard to hit your shots with, and the other half is way too easy to hit your shots with. So I guess that averages him out to be about B tier, where he's kind of hard, but also not too hard. So yeah, I think that makes sense. Next is Tara with a score of 2.87. Last time I had her in the B tier, and you guys put her in the B tier as well. Tara's pretty average. Yes, there is a lot of skill in making sure that you use her super at the right time when you have ammo and when you can survive actually using her super. But at the same time, her attack is really easy to hit. You can auto aim with it a lot of the time. I'm good with her being in the B tier. Next, we have Brock with a score of 2.92. Last time I had him in the A tier, and I'm putting him down in the B tier. And I'm honestly good with this change. It's hard for you to hit your shots when he's like in the middle of the distance because his rockets actually are very thin. But once they explode, they have a massive radius that's pretty hard to miss. So like out of the sharpshooters, yeah, B is the easiest, but I feel like Brock is fair in the B tier as well. Next is Grom with a score of 2.94. I had him in the B tier, and you guys put him right back in the B tier. Ah, man, and Grom, honestly, I feel like he just provides so much value for how easy he is to play right now. Grom's actually had quite a few changes since the last time where they've increased the duration that it takes for his attacks to actually land, and like there's a lot of stuff that's happened with him, but I still feel like B tier is pretty fair for him, and honestly I'd love for him to get a nerf. Next is Gus with a score of 2.96. Last time I had him in the A tier, and he's going down into the B tier. Gus was fairly new when I did the last ranking, and his super was way harder to actually hit your teammates with. Since then they've buffed the speed of it, and they made it so that his super could actually go through walls to heal teammates, which makes his super way easier to use, and because of that, moving from the A tier down to the B tier for skill is definitely the right call. Next is Sam, and his scores are all over the board. You guys are very undecided on Sam. Last time I put Sam in the S tier, and now he's going down into the B tier. Previously, my thought with Sam was the fact there's a lot to manage with. Do you actually throw out your knuckle busters and then wait to reload and then pick them up, or do you, like, how do you actually manage your knuckle busters in his two different phases with and without them? Because he deals less damage without his knuckle busters, but he reloads faster. In the end, you pretty much just always want his knuckle busters, and you can use his super over and over again. He also has a free super at the very beginning of the match, which no other brawler has, with the exception of Edgar or Buzz when they actually use their gadget. But Sam just starts out with it. Like, I don't know. I can see him being in the B tier. I could honestly also see him in the A tier as well. I do think he's a little bit trickier to master than B tier, but I'm fine with B tier. Up next is Max with an even average score of 3. I put her at the bottom of the C tier, and now she's going up near the top of the B tier. And I can see this. I really can. Max's range is really short, but she's really fast. So she has to get into close range combat and dodge people up close while also firing these really super skinny projectiles that aren't super easy to hit with. So yeah, I can see that there's a lot of strategy in using her super at the right time. She's not the hardest to master, but she's definitely not the easiest. Next is Colonel Russ with a score of 3.05. I had Russ in the A tier, and he's going down to the B tier. And I'm good with you guys lowering him down into the B tier. He does have his bounce shots, which aren't super easy to use, but at the same time, they're wider than like Rico's attacks are. So it's actually easier for you to hit your shots with him than like Rico. And as for his super, you pretty much just want to throw it to your teammates almost every single time if you can't hit it on an enemy. If you can hit it on an enemy, then please do that for sure. Next is Colette with a score of 3.05. I had her at the bottom of the B tier. She's going up near the top of the B tier. I feel like that's pretty fair. Her shot's actually pretty wide, not too difficult to hit. Her super is also not too bad. The thing is that I don't like about playing Colette is that you have to keep track of percentages, but really it's the same when you're facing every single brawler. So as long as you play her enough to know what those percentages are and how many times you have to hit them before you can super them to death, it's not too hard to play her. But doing so does take a little time and practice. Next is Belle with a score of 3.09. I had her near the bottom of the A tier, and she's moving near the top of the B tier. So she's really not the hardest, but she's also not the easiest. Her shots do take some skill to land, but the nice thing about her super is that if you hit her super, then the enemy's going to struggle for the rest of the match unless they get defeated. Next is 8-Bit with a score of 3.1. I had 8-Bit in the A tier, and he's moving down into the very top of the B tier, so it's really close, but I feel like this makes sense. The hardest thing with 8-Bit is just learning to deal with how slow he is and how big his hitbox is. It's very hard for you to actually dodge any shots, and also leading your shots is a little bit more difficult than a brawler like Colt because you're slower, so it's harder to do that. But overall, definitely not the hardest brawler to master. Next is Lou with a score of 3.15. I had Lou near the top of the B tier, and he's moving to the very bottom of the A tier. You know, honestly, I can see this. His shots are not very easy for you to actually hit, and his shots are really important to hit because his super is actually what makes Lou really good. The one thing that is tricky though is putting in a spot where your opponents are going to want to walk through it, because typically what happens is once he puts his super down, everyone just avoids that section and avoids Lou to try and prevent him from actually recharging up another super. So definitely not the easiest brawler to play. Okay, next we have Gray with a score of 3.16. Gray wasn't released the last time I made this video, so he's starting out in the A tier. And honestly, I feel like this is pretty much a perfect place for him. His super is really great, but his shots are actually pretty hard to hit because of how narrow they are. When he was first released, the opponents actually couldn't really see his projectiles very well. They're much better now, but even then, he's still pretty difficult to play. Up next is Meg with an average of 3.19. 9. I had her down in the B tier and you guys are putting her in the A tier. And yeah, this is hard because Meg without her mecha, very difficult to play. Hitting her shots is hard. She does almost no damage. She has little HP. Very difficult to play. But once she charges up her super, she's so easy to play. Yes, you do have to stay back and stay healed so that you can actually stay in her mecha for longer. But, I mean, her shots are so easy to hit. She deals so much damage. If anybody gets closer, you just use your super and delete them. Honestly, I could see people justifying her being B tier or A tier, so I'm good with her in the A tier. Next, we got Gene with the score of 3.2. I had Gene in the A tier. You guys have him in the A tier, so I'm good with this. Yes, his shots are very easy to hit from a distance. However, that also just barely charges any super. It also just barely deals any damage. And every single match, if you're playing against really skilled players, there's a good chance you're only going to get 1, maybe even 2 super pulls, and that really matters. So if you miss them, playing Gene was pretty much a waste the entire match. But if you get them, congratulations, you just won the match for your team. He's definitely not the easiest brawler to master, and A tier makes sense for him. Next is Sprout with a score of 3.23. Last time I had Sprout in the A tier, and you guys put Sprout in the A tier as well. Yes, Sprout is a thrower, and the projectile does have a massive blast radius, but before it actually explodes, it's pretty hard to hit Sprout's attacks. And you also have that added difficulty of being able to bounce its attacks off of walls and stuff like that, which can sometimes make Sprout a little bit easier to play, but also kind of a little bit harder. There's some cool things you can do with it if you really master Sprout. Next is Byron with a score of 3.24. Last time I put him in the A tier and so did you guys, so this makes sense. Byron actually got a lot of nerfs since the last time I did this, and he's not harder to play. He's still pretty much the same, but the thing is you have to hit your shots, and there's a lot that you can do with him. Do you focus on dealing damage? Do you focus on healing? Do you use your super to try and prevent enemies from healing after they get hit by it with his star power? Or do you use it to splash yourself or a teammate or something like that? There's a lot of different things you can do with Byron. There's a lot to manage. And if you're going to play him, you really have to support your teammates a lot while also dealing damage and make sure that your ammo is always being used efficiently. There's a pretty big jump from Byron's score of 3.24 up to Rico at 3.67. This is where the S tier starts, and I put him in the S tier as well. Rico's attacks are very narrow. You can bounce your shots in a lot of different ways that are very difficult to master. Yes, he has a lot of added benefits in narrow corridors and stuff like that that kind of make him a little bit easier, but every single map is different for Rico, and he has different spots that work better or poorer for him, and so you really have to know a lot when you're playing him. Next is Mandy with a score of 3.7. Mandy wasn't released the last time I did this, so she is starting in the S tier. This is actually a little bit surprising to me and also not surprising to me. Part of me wonders if this is because Mandy's just not very good. She has a mechanic where she stands still that actually increases her range, but standing still makes her such an easy target, and it's almost useless to use it most of the time. Then again, I'm almost never seeing Mandy play in competitive play because, like I said, I don't think she's very good right now. So is she hard to master, or are her mechanics just clunky? Either way, right now, she's hard to win matches with, which is why I think you guys put her in the S tier, and I'm good with that for now. Next is Stu with a score of 3.73. I had him in the S tier, you guys put him in the S tier, and there's no doubt about it. Stu is very difficult to master. There's a lot to manage when it comes to moving his super in the right direction and attacking people when you do so, using it to push forward, using it to push back. He's really complex and honestly a lot of fun as well. So like, he's hard to master, but he's well worth it, and honestly can be incredibly good if you play him well. Next is Dynamite with a score of 3.88. Now in the last video, I made an entire tier for Dynamite, the impossible tier, and now he's moving down into the S tier. And yes, he was impossible back then, but then they nerfed his attack speed so that you can't double jump with him very effectively. You still can with his super, but is that a part of mastering Dynamite? Yeah, I would argue that it is a part of mastering Dynamite. So should he even be higher? I think you could argue that, but I think that Dynamite has lost a lot in the fact that like, it's not really useful for you to try and double jump with his super. Like the perks of double jumping was with his attacks in the middle of a fight. And yes, you can do that, but like, I don't know. I feel like S tier is a good spot for him, especially if we're not gonna add an impossible tier like we had last time. Okay, next is Piper with a score of 3.9. I put Piper down in the A tier, and you guys are moving her up into the S tier above Dynamite and Stu. Oh, I have serious hesitations. I will agree, it is hard to hit your shots with Piper. I super get that, but she also has like a panic button gadget if people get too close to her with her auto aimer that slows them and pushes them back far enough that she can actually deal some decent damage against them. Or if you go with her other gadget, Homemade Recipe, that's pretty much a free hit. So with Piper, all you do is you hit that first shot, activate her gadget, and shoot another shot in the general direction, and it's very likely going to hit your opponent and kill them. I understand she's difficult, I really do, but I don't know if I can put her in the S tier, but I mean, this is your guys' tier list, so she'll stay in the S tier. I'm just sharing my thoughts. Next is Nani with a score of 4.03. And I did have Nani in the S tier last time, so I feel like this makes sense. Nani's shots are very difficult to aim exactly perfectly. If you do, you hit all 3 projectiles and they're gonna take insane damage, but doing that is really hard. Plus, she's incredibly vulnerable with her super, and sometimes even just hitting your super on an opponent isn't that easy. It's not like the hardest skill in the game, but Nani overall is a very hard brawler to master, and S tier makes perfect sense for her. Now we're jumping up from Nani with a score of 4.03 up to Colt with a score of 4.27. I put Colt in the S tier, you guys put Colt in the S tier. And yes, Colt is one of the hardest brawlers to master. His attacks are very narrow, and being able to lead your shots just perfectly, it takes a lot of skill. You have to read your opponent while dodging opponent's shots, all while aiming in the right direction and waiting to see them move so that you can actually hit them. It's not an easy skill to pull off, and it's very understandable that a lot of people will rank him as one of the most difficult brawlers to master. But then we have another big jump from Colt at 4.27 all the way up to Mortis at 4.4. I put Mortis in the S tier, you guys put him in the S tier, and honestly, I do think that he deserves that #1 spot. Mortis is incredibly difficult to master. You have to use his attacks to get to people, deal damage to them, or run away from them, or dodge shots. But if you do dodge shots, then you're not gonna have ammo to actually take them out. There's so much to think about and consider. Do you activate his gadget? When do you activate his gadget? How to use his super to heal on multiple opponents all at once. You have to do so while you're right up next to enemies and the pressure is really high and intense. Yes, last time I ranked Dynamite higher because of the double jumping, stuff like that, but I can't deny now that Mortis is the hardest brawler in the game to master, and he's a lot of fun to play as well. By the way, for Willow, I haven't been able to play her against actual players at the time of me recording this, so we'll put her in A tier. I don't know, maybe controlling enemies won't be as hard as I thought it. Maybe B tier. We'll just put her in the safe B tier. I don't know. But there you have it. Every brawler ranked from easiest to master all the way up to hardest to master. If you guys share this, don't cut out my face. And also, make sure you let people know that this was not mine. But honestly, most of them are actually within 1 tier anyway, so I don't know. If you disagree with this now, I still love and accept you. Thanks for subscribing and watching all of my content, guys. You can see another video right here, and subscribe for future content if you haven't already. For now, this is KairosTime ticking by, and we will see you in Brawl Stars.